Go to Beijing now, where we are joined by Xu Qinduo. He's a political analyst with China Radio International. Let's start with this. Pyongyang basically answering the UN sanctions by firing off another missile. What happens next? What kind of response do you think we're going to see? Obviously, China will weigh in, the U.S., the UN, ROK, and Japan. Any idea what we're going to see?
Well, obviously, we are going to hear a lot of condemnations from, the related countries, the U.S., China, Japan, South Korea. Already heard of that. But I don't expect another round of fresh sanctions against North Korea. We just have the latest round of sanctions, a few days ago. That's probably the most biting sanctions against North Korea. For the sanctions to produce the desired pressure, it takes some time. But this latest round of missile test does create a new level of sense of urgency for other countries in terms of implementing the sanctions, in terms of tightening pressure on North Korea. And also, this gives the international community even little reason, say, to consider even the humanitarian situation in North Korea in implementing those sanctions, let's say.
Just a couple of days ago, the U.S. President Donald Trump said that the sanctions are no big deal. It appears he may actually be right, because it's not deterring the DPRK from abandoning their nuclear program. Instead, they respond this way. China has said for some time the answer is a diplomatic one, but how do you get everyone on the path to dialogue?
Good point, Mike. This is obviously very difficult. Seems to me like the international community has been focusing on pressuring North Korea to come back to the negotiating table. So in the sense, I think there's no surprise to see the latest missile test by North Korea, because that's typical behavior of North Korea. They would use confrontation against confrontation, pressure against pressure. At the same time, they need tests to improve, to perfect their technology, nuclear technology. So that's what they are going to do. I think this is not a surprise. President Trump is right. I think this is not a surprise. But then again, even you impose so-called big deal sanctions, North Korea will continue with this nuclear test or missile test. As President Putin of Russia has said, they would rather eat grass than giving up their weapons. But on the other hand, there's, if you look at this whole issue in a comprehensive way, I think the international community should also offer some chances, opportunities, or create the conditions to start the negotiating process. China has proposed the two suspension system, suspension for suspension, the mechanism. That is like a nuclear test will be suspended by North Korea in exchange for the suspension of military drills by U.S. and South Korea. If we can do that, at least we'll probably initiate another round of negotiation. Negotiation is always good than testing of missiles or nuclear.
And you mentioned Putin's comment they'd rather eat grass. We heard also the ROK, about $8 million in humanitarian aid aimed towards the DPRK to deal with malnutrition. I mean, isn't that the folks who are really going to hurt, not the leadership? It's going to be the regular people there in the DPRK?
Exactly, Mike. This is the point I also want to point out. If you take a look at the latest round of sanctions, textile products and also the ban on the petro products, they are not exactly directly related to the nuclear development, especially textile products. That would mean basically the factories will be closed and workers will be laid off and people's livelihood will be affected in the long term. So this is really the common folks who will suffer the most from these UN sanctions, not necessarily the leadership, which should be the target. So that's why those sanctions are really hard to make, and also there would be sometimes in the future, say in this winter, with this kind of like embargo on their oil products here. What if there is some like humanitarian crisis, like young kids, boys, girls will be somehow affected. Even some of them might even be killed in the winter time. We don't know. So you have to strike a balance. This is really a difficult balancing act for the international community, especially for countries like China, and South Korea, who are directly bothering North Korea here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for your analysis. Appreciate it.